Hello everyone, and welcome back to my page. I have worked on it a lot since the beginning of the quarter, as we all have, so I'm excited to share it all with you and kind of give you a little bit more insight into some of my decisions and why I chose to include the posts that I did and the images. And yeah, so we will get started with the identity page. This is pretty much the same as when I first created it at the beginning of the quarter. I added a couple quotes and things, but if you need a refresher, definitely check that out. It's something that I think still pretty accurately reflects who I consider myself to be and kind of gives a little bit of history into my personal experience and how I came to be where I am. Um, so the first part that I will talk about is the Inspired Insights section. The first post that I chose to talk about is the What Tribe exhibit that we went to go see. I think it was week 5, maybe a little bit later. But I found that visiting this exhibit was really enlightening and inspiring to me because I felt like I was able to get a really good look at the experiences of some of my peers in the DU community and how their identities as Native people have really shaped their experience and who they see themselves and kind of what they are working towards and what they value in life. Kind of one of the most, I guess, resonating things was a quote by Amanda Williams that I chose to include. I really liked this quote because it resonated with my own personal experience and how I view education and its ability to be a form of resistance, especially for communities that do not often have or haven't historically had access to education. Um, and so it really resonated with me, and so I chose to talk about that a lot and how it kind of inspired me to continue learning about issues that are facing Native communities because these issues are something that are really important, and we've talked a lot about them in this class so far, and I think it's really awesome that we've had that opportunity because it's not something that you hear about a lot in popular discourse, and so I think often Native people are left behind as the sort of as if their identity is based on this sense of nostalgia or it's not something that's in the present. We kind of think of, I don't know, cowboys and Indians sort of historical representations of Native people when that's not necessarily true anymore. And they are people who are involved in education, involved in art, involved in politics. And so I think this exhibit as a whole really was insightful in that respect. And so that's why I chose to include that um, in my portfolio. The next post I chose to talk about was participant action research methodology, and I found this to be really interesting because um, in my classes in communication and research, I've been really heavily influenced by qualitative research and a little bit of quantitative research. And I just thought it was really interesting how this methodology really focuses on action and how change occurs, which is really important because from an academic standpoint, we often kind of sit in the back and analyze the data that we collect as something that's separate from us or something that's separate from the actual, I guess, work that's being done to create change. And so I think that this methodology really offers a chance to really be more involved in change and understand how different theories of change and epistemologies are important to include when conducting research. And so I chose this because it's something that I hope to start to include in my own research that I hope to do in the future. Because it's definitely something that was new to me, and so it's definitely inspiring to kind of see the benefits of this methodology. And so I chose to include that because it kind of inspired me to learn more about it and possibly consider using it for my future research. I next chose to talk about the concept of love. I think this is really interesting because when doing work towards social justice, which is something that I have experience in, um, the readings talked about a lot, it can often be seen as a sense of despair or hopelessness just because um, these institutional inequalities are really difficult to change, as we've kind of learned about so far. And so the idea of including love in that is something that was a little bit foreign to me, just because it's it's something that I don't think is really valued in terms of as a way to change people. At least it's not something that I really consider, just because I think that it kind of has to be. I was under the previous notion that you kind of have to be out there and active and really vocal and focusing really on why things are not okay rather than trying to really connect with people on a human level, which I guess that shouldn't have been such a surprise to me, but it really inspired me to kind of take a look at how the rhetoric that is used and incorporated into work to create change. And so I chose a song that I thought was interesting because it kind of had a lot of the same concepts that we were talking about love as a healing factor and a way to heal pain and to create connection and relationships. So definitely check that out. It's from Rent. I believe it's from the movie version, though, just for anyone who's familiar with the musical. So yeah. And then, yeah, the example that I chose to use for this part was an ad campaign that was done in DC about transgender equality and respect. And so it was a really interesting campaign because it drew on the experiences of several different people and talked about how they're part of the DC community and they're part of I guess that identity of as living in DC, and so they asked that they are treated with respect and they're treated with love because that's what they're doing. They're trying to live their lives just like the rest of us, and so I thought it was really interesting because it kind of drew on that notion of humanity rather than I guess I don't know activism and I don't know, marching for your rights. It's more of a interpersonal thing, which I think is really cool. And yeah, so that is my inspired insights section. And next we will go to magnificent failures. Um, when I chose to talk about this, I chose to analyze my first discussion post about when I was talking about my own identity. And I saw this as somewhat as a failure because it was it is something that I've tried to really understand because it's a concept, the concept of intersectionality is something that I'm familiar with and that I have studied before, and so I felt like I was doing a good job in using it as a lens to kind of examine my own cultural identity. But I found that I really wasn't doing that, and that I was really focusing on maybe one or two aspects of my identity, which I think is really easy to do, especially being a person of color and living in a place that is so racially homogenous in a lot of ways. I think I'm just predisposed to kind of only focus on one aspect of my identity rather than realizing that all aspects are important. And so I kind of chose to talk about that and how it was something that I need to continue to work on because even though I feel like that I might be getting better at understanding intersectionality, I still have a lot to learn, which is kind of something that is persistent throughout this entire journey. Just because I'm always learning, as much as I try to educate myself about any of these issues, I still learn something new every day with each article I read or with interaction that I have. So, yeah. And then I chose to include a quote about intersectionality that I found that was really awesome, just because it kind of it gave me a different way to look at it and kind of emphasized its importance. So I definitely chose that because it was something that kind of reinforced as to what I needed to improve on in terms of understanding intersectionality. The next section I chose to talk about the idea of silence or kind of staying with the status quo and kind of letting these things stay stagnant. I connected it with not posting during week 3. And so I kind of made somewhat of a jump to connect not posting for a class to the idea of being, I guess, okay with social inequality, but I thought it was a good connecting point because um, it is interesting because the more I try to be active, the more I realize that there's a lot that I need to learn and to do still in order to really make change if I want to really make our society more equal. And so I connected it to the idea of remaining silent and kind of taking a back seat to social change. So while I'm here educating myself about all of these social structures and systems of oppression and historical implications of all of it, I find that sometimes maybe that I'm not being active enough in trying to create change. And so I connected the idea of kind of being silent with social stagnation and not doing enough to really address the issues and realizing that how I guess my privilege in being someone who has the ability to pursue academia can kind of sometimes be a barrier in terms of being socially active. So it was just a reminder to me to kind of move past that and to become a little bit more active. And so now I will talk about unanticipated connections. So in this portion, the first section, I chose to talk about colonization as a global issue, and I related it to a class that I took when I studied abroad about Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander history with colonization in Australia and the Torres Strait Islands, because it's something that as I was there, I was able to make a lot of connections to the way that Native Americans here are treated. And so as I was learning in this class, there was just more and more things that were coming up that um, was really connecting the two communities for me. And I thought it was interesting just how colonization has really affected lot of native people, whether it's in Australia or Africa or North America, Latin America. These are all places that have been, I guess, negatively affected or exploited by colonization. And so I chose to connect it and realize that it was and I realized that it's a global issue. Um, and so I talked a little bit how that experience was something that was kind of eye-opening for me. And then again, taking this class was something that really exemplified why this is a global issue and why it's something that needs to be addressed in many different areas. Um, so yeah, that was something that was really eye-opening for me. And now I will talk about a video that I chose to include. I chose to include the song. It's in Spanish, so I included the English translation. And I connected it to the idea of social change within marginalized communities and the idea of how we often view marginalized communities as only uh, damaged and impoverished and poor and uneducated. And while that is true, and it's really important to recognize how those are issues so that you can address and correct them, I think it is important to recognize the positive outcomes that are the positive contributions that these communities make and how they have a sense of pride and a sense of autonomy and agency in creating a future that is better for them. And so I think the song really does a good job of addressing that historical exploitation and discrimination while still creating a sense of pride and hope for the future. So I really like that song, so that's why I chose to include it. The last one that I chose to include for this section was kind of similar idea, but the idea of contention that was talked about in Eve Tuck's article as a way to create change. And I thought this was interesting because a lot of civil rights leaders, especially civil rights leaders of color, have been seen as radical and unpatriotic, and that's something that I can kind of feel affinity with because I feel like when you are critical of social structures and the status quo, you're labeled as unpatriotic or dangerous. And so and that was something that I wasn't expecting to come up in this class, but I'm really glad it did because these are definitely movements that are deeply rooted in contention and the idea that you need to make some waves before you can make change. And so that's why I included it in this post. That is pretty much all of my portfolio. I really enjoyed making it and I learned a lot. So definitely check it out, and I would appreciate your feedback. Thanks.